Welcome back to this self-help program for panic and anxiety. In this module, we will continue where we left off and look at various catastrophe thoughts that can trigger panic and anxiety. We'll also look at some examples of appropriate exposure exercises. Engaging in exposure means actively seeking out challenging situations that gives you anxiety, with as little safety behaviors as possible. A great strategy is to base the exposure on the thing you fear the most, the catastrophe. This will let you maximize the effectiveness of the exercise because it will enable the most effective reality checking possible, which can in turn break the vicious circle of anxiety. What people fear can vary a great deal, and what might seem scary to you might seem totally harmless to another, and vice versa. We will now go through some typical catastrophe thoughts, but it's your job to find out what's right for you. I might lose control. It's very common to be afraid of losing control while having a panic attack. And this is understandable, considering that the panic itself seems to be out of control. Here we must make a clear distinction between control over yourself and control over the anxiety itself. The anxiety reaction is a kind of alarm saying that you should be careful, watch out, that you are in danger. When you get anxious, you become extremely vigilant and attentive, in total control of yourself. If you drive a car with anxiety, you will become extremely focused on safety, watching everything extra carefully, so not to risk a potential crash. Maybe gripping the wheel extra tightly and slowing down the car speed. In total control, in other words. It's much more likely that an unfocused, tired or overconfident driver without any anxiety will make a mistake behind the wheel. Many are afraid that the anxiety will reach a critical, extreme level where one suddenly snaps and loses control completely. But this never happens. You have control over yourself, but not direct control over your anxiety. What types of situations and sensations are relevant? Situations where I'm afraid of losing control. The feeling of anxiety. Driving. While on public transportation. In situations where I cannot easily escape, like at the cinema, at the end of a crowded bench, and in a closed and important meeting. Out alone in nature. Examples of appropriate exposure exercises. Take a drive. Take public transportation. Go to the cinema. Go for a walk alone in the woods. Seek out situations where you cannot easily escape if something were to happen. Catastrophe thought. I'm having a heart attack. It's no coincidence that many with anxiety are afraid of their heart. This is partly because the heart is a noisy organ, which can make scary sensations even though your heart is completely healthy. Examples include a pounding heartbeat, rhythm changes, double heartbeats, also called extrasystoles, and a weak heartbeat. Also, genuine heart disease is dangerous, a perfect combination of ending up in the panic circle. Anxiety can trigger the bodily sensations that you fear. Usually, one doesn't feel one's own heartbeat at all. But boy, can you feel it if you're afraid that there's something wrong with your heart. The signal is sensitized or amplified by your brain because of the anxiety. Just as you perceived loud, scary sounds outside your room when you were a child. For you, the sounds were loud and you were afraid that they came from a monster. For your parents, the sounds were unnoticeable as they didn't think anything of it. Our brain makes us pay attention to dangers and reinforces the perceptual signal. Others are afraid that their heart will get damaged because of all the anxiety. Can a healthy heart become damaged by beating too hard for too long? Well, the answer to this is an unequivocal no. It's not dangerous for a normal healthy heart to pound away, just as it isn't dangerous for a healthy person to go on a long and heavy jogging trip. Not only that, jogging is good for you. If you're afraid that something is wrong with your heart, we recommend that you contact your doctor and tell him or her what you're experiencing and what you're afraid of. You then let your doctor evaluate whether you're healthy. After all, you are no doctor. And you have been wrong many times before. When you get a clean bill of health, you can go ahead with exposure and seek out the false alarm to reality test the catastrophic thoughts. What types of situations and sensations are relevant? Situations that trigger a rapid pulse where I can't get help. When I feel my pulse. The feeling of tightness in the chest. When I read about heart disease. Examples of suitable exposure exercises. Run on the treadmill as intensely as I can. Run harder if I get afraid. Run outdoors. Walk upstairs with a stethoscope while listening to the heart. Be in a crowd that triggers anxiety and a pounding heartbeat. Drink a lot of coffee that activates the body through caffeine. Read about the heart attacks, and people who have died of heart attacks. Hyperventilate as hard as you can for a minute with a scarf tied tightly around your chest. Catastrophic thought. I might faint from anxiety. The fear of fainting has a lot of potential to initiate the panic circle. Fainting can be scary by itself, and it could also be dangerous if you pass out while driving or doing something that requires your attention. Anxiety can induce a feeling of dizziness and derealization, which can feel as though you are about to faint. But can anxiety make you faint? The reason people faint is due to a blood pressure drop, giving the brain insufficient oxygen. What happens to your blood pressure if you are anxious or are having a panic attack? Well, just the opposite. Blood pressure rises as a part of the fight or flight reaction. This means that you are in no risk of fainting from anxiety alone. One exception to this rule is blood phobia, or the fear of blood, which is a special case where some might faint at the sight of blood. And we'll talk more about that in our video on phobias. What types of situations and sensations are relevant? The anxiety reaction that resembles fainting. Situations where I'm afraid to faint, e.g. standing while driving a car, being in a crowd, etc. Examples of suitable exposure exercises. Drive a car and seek out the anxiety. Hyperventilate as hard as I can for a minute to promote dizziness, then stand up. Seek out situations where it would be unfortunate to faint. Catastrophe thought. I might go crazy from anxiety. Anxiety can promote a strange feeling of derealization, where you might feel that you are suddenly alien to yourself and the world around you. If you close your eyes, you might feel that you are floating or falling. Very unpleasant indeed. Some may start worrying that they're completely losing it or going crazy, falling into psychosis, becoming schizophrenic or severely mentally ill. Maybe this is just the beginning of a gradual slide into permanent madness. So, can anxiety make one psychotic or lead you to lose your grip on reality or lead you to involuntarily commit suicide? No, no, and no. The worst part of panic and anxiety is the feeling itself and how it can restrict you in your daily life. In no way, shape or form is the anxiety a sign that you are actually sliding into madness. Everyone experiences anxiety during their life, but more serious forms of mental illness are very rare. The fear of becoming severely mentally ill can in no way trigger severe mental illness, even though you might experience unpleasant sensations. The same point applies to the catastrophe that one might snap and do something terrible, like commit suicide. If you think about it, the anxiety is a sign that this is something that you really don't want to do. It scares you. What types of situations and sensations are relevant? Reminders of serious mental illness, suicide and psychiatry. Strange feelings, derealization, feeling disconnected. Doing actions that follow your conception of severe mental illness. Examples of suitable exposure exercises. Read or watch documentaries about suicide, psychosis, or mental illness in general. Seek out the feeling of being disconnected by hyperventilating for a minute. Find various optical illusions that trigger anxiety by making you doubt what you're seeing. Act as if you're crazy. Stare into the mirror while making scary faces. Pretend to be crazy. Wear your clothes the wrong way around. Sit naked on the bathroom floor for a while. Catastrophe thought. I'm suffocating. You might feel as though you're not getting enough air or suffocating when you're panicking. This catastrophe thought is reinforced by the feeling of anxiety, which makes it feel like something awful is about to happen. We can ask ourselves, are we ever in danger of not getting enough air? Can we forget to breathe? Can anxiety make us suffocate? Well, the good news here is that the brain has a fail-safe system to make sure we get enough air. You can test this yourself by trying to hold your breath. In a very short period of time, you will have an unstoppable urge to breathe. This system works even if you're unconscious, for example while you're sleeping. If you're healthy, then there's simply nowhere you're not getting enough air. What types of situations and sensations are relevant? Suffocation sensations. Situations where you're afraid that you get too little oxygen, e.g. large crowds, narrow spaces, public transportation. Examples of appropriate exposure exercises. Read about oxygen, lungs, and breathing. Try to breathe through a straw that promotes the feeling of suffocation. Breathe as slow and as little as you can. Hold your breath. Strap something tight around your chest. Seek out situations where you fear that you aren't getting enough oxygen. Catastrophe thought. I'm going to pee in my pants, or soil myself, or throw up due to anxiety. It's quite common to fear losing control of yourself, either by peeing or soiling yourself, or by throwing up due to anxiety. This catastrophe thought can border into another type of anxiety, namely social anxiety, because what one fears is being negatively evaluated by others if the catastrophe occurs. See our self-help program for social anxiety if you want more information. Generally speaking, anxiety can trigger an urge to go to the bathroom, and many become nauseous. So it's not difficult to imagine how the panic circle gets started here. Anxiety makes you think that the catastrophe is just around the corner, which in turn makes the feeling of nausea or pressure on your bladder or bowels become even more intense, and so on. For some, this process gets started because of an accident, where one actually experiences what one fears. Accidents happen, and it can be terribly embarrassing and uncomfortable. It's no wonder that you start safety behavior and avoidance, to ensure that it doesn't happen again. The goal of the exposure is to break the relationship between the feeling of anxiety and the belief that the catastrophe will strike. How often have you been afraid that the catastrophe will happen? How many times have the catastrophe actually occurred? Is your anxiety a good indicator that the catastrophe will occur? Many have experienced anxiety and dreaded the catastrophe hundreds, perhaps thousands of times, but never experienced what they actually fear. This makes the anxiety a very poor indicator. It's as if a weather forecast was wrong 100% of the time. Should you continue trusting this forecast? Is anxiety a good indicator that the catastrophe will actually happen? Should you trust the forecast if it's wrong 99.9% of the time? What are the pros and cons of following this forecast? How does it affect your life? Are you willing to challenge the catastrophe thought and seek out anxiety and the feeling of nausea or pressure on your bladder or bowels to get rid of the anxiety in the long run? Well, here are some examples. What types of situations and sensations are relevant? Situations where one cannot escape or go to the toilet or throw up without anyone noticing. Public transportation, large crowds, the feeling of nausea, the feeling of having to go to the bathroom. Situations where you don't know where the nearest toilet is. Colleagues and other people you're afraid will see you lose control. Examples of appropriate exposure exercises. Take public transport without access to a bathroom. Seek out crowds without access to a toilet. Go to meetings with colleagues. Put yourself in the middle of a bench so that you cannot easily escape the situation. Drink a lot of water and or eat laxative food before taking a walk around the city. Go to the mall and look for smells and sensations that make you nauseous. We can also mention that some may panic if their stomach makes noises due to the embarrassment. If you recognize this, then we recommend our self-help program for social anxiety as a supplement. These were all the examples we had. It's your job to be observant and ask yourself, what am I afraid of? And tailor your exposure as accurately as you can. You can start the next module when it suits you, where you get some last helpful strategies to keep in mind while doing exposure. See you later.